Hi everybody, thank you for participating in the Year of Flowers. We'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring the event, Lawrenceburg Library for hosting it, and you for expressing interest in checking out your kits. So for the month of April, we chose the flower rose. And what's going to be in your takeout kit today is an ounce of food grade red rose petals. And they're going to look just like this. These are the ones I'm going to touch, and then I've got some for Quinn, don't let me forget to leave behind. And then yours are going to be in your bag. You're going to have your weighed ounce, and then remember your organic drawstring cosmetic grade muslin bag that you can use as your kitchen tool. So you can use it for infusing, right, to make teas and all sorts of other things that we've talked about throughout the series. Now, before I talk about the really cool little highlights of roses and how long they've been esteemed and loved and why we still carry them into today's world and love them now, I just wanted to mention that if you've checked these kits out and you have an interest in the Year of Flowers, then you're probably noticing right about this time in our Lawrenceburg, we have all these violets blooming. This is right out here in front of the library. And I'm sure you have them in your yard, in your woods where they haven't been sprayed and they're safe. You should harvest some, and then when they dry into almost no weight at all, but they do dry really well, and then they rehydrate surprisingly well too. So you can dry them like on wax paper and then just keep them in a mason jar, and when they hit hot water again, they rehydrate and expand and look almost fresh again. They're really hard to get in commerce. I was talking to Sheila about this on my way in. You should see her backyard full of violets, because they do dry up to such a light weight. There's not a lot of money in them. So the time that I've seen them for sale in really cool apothecary magazines or shops, they're sold by the gram. That's how light they are. So there is an interest in a market for the violet flower as a commerce herb or trading herb, but there's just not a lot of it out there yet. So I just wanted to mention that it is a food grade flower. It's beautiful. It makes incredible colors. We could do a whole class on that. I just wasn't able to choose it as a flower of the month because we wouldn't be able to fill a bag, 15 bags up with an ounce because it dries to such a light weight. So if you're feeling feisty and you want to gather a bunch of violets and dry them, they have an incredible shelf life, and I'd be shocked if you couldn't find a way to trade or use them in the herbal community. Now back to our wonderful red rose petals. So the roses that we're going to use today are the apothecary species. That's why we're going to cook with them and put them on our skin and maybe introduce them into teas and things of that nature. Now there are over 150 species of roses from Alaska to Mexico, and they range from a highly cultivated species to a wild bramble rose that we might find in our woods. So it's specifically important that when you do cook or eat or do medicine making with red rose petals that you want to be sure you have the apothecary species, which is the Rosa Gallicia officinalis, okay? And it's not a difficult one to find or anything like that. It just wouldn't be the same medicine and the same properties and attributes as like a long stem rose or a rose that you might get at a florist or something like that, or like the little tea roses. So again, we want to be sure that we always have the apothecary species if we're going to medicine make or use them in our herbal apothecary. Many, many species, all the way from the corner of the coldest spot to the hottest spot. Again, highly cultivated, and it likely prompted some of the first intentional horticulture and gardening. So in anthropology and history, they've gone back and tried to figure out what cultures and civilizations did many moons ago, and there's evidence of intentionally planted wild roses from nomadic tribes. So as the nomads would travel through on their paths, they would dig up the wild roses they would find in the woods and in the bramble and intentionally plant them, and they created, after years and years of nomadic traveling, these hedges and shrubs of intentionally cultivated wild rose hedges. So that's pretty cool. There's also a living rose bush that is 1,000 years old. It's in a cathedral, the Hildesheim Cathedral in Germany, and it's in a monastery, and the monks there have tended to it and basically babied it and treated it with kid gloves and have made it live to 1,000 years old. And I heard that it bloomed again last year, so it's thriving. The scent, oh, let's see, I forgot this one. The Greeks and Romans, there's a lot of historical stories about using rose petals as currency. So before there were coins or dollar bills, or if you were a really poor like peasant person, you might have lived your whole life in Greece or Rome and never had a golden or a silver coin, but you would exchange salt that we've talked about before in other classes and rose petals as forms of trade or currency. So the scent of the rose petal and the condition, the color, basically the quality would give it its value and make it worth less or more when you were doing your bartering or your exchanging. And then in the world of perfume making and just life, right, the scent is fundamental and easily recognized. I don't think any of us could smell a rose and not know that that was the scent of a rose. And we could do an entire class just on rose absolute, which is basically the form of essential oil that's extracted from the rose petal. And just so you know, in the world of essential oils, an absolute's a little bit different. It's when they specifically use the petals of the flower and press out teeny minute little drops of the essence. So jasmine is another absolute and vanilla is another absolute, those little flowers. So rose absolute is very expensive. So if you're ever essential oil shopping and you want a rose absolute for a recipe or a scent, don't be surprised that it's really, really expensive. That is par for the course because it's so hard to extract and obtain. So can you only imagine how many fresh rose petals it would take in a press or a vise to get a little bit of drop of the essential oil out, or the absolute oil? A lot, right? So I don't remember the numbers offhand, but it's something crazy like 3,000 pounds of flowers make like 1 ounce of absolute. So just an example of it takes a lot of botanical to get a little of that essence. Now we're going to talk about the recipes and some ideas for you to use on your own at home. So probably one of the most common and favorite uses of rose is rose water. It's been used in many traditions, mainly as a cosmetic for your face and as a toner, but also used as a cleansing agent, a healer, ways to charge stones and crystals, make spaces sacred, as an anointing water, so things of that nature. It has a broad historical use. And what you can do with your roses here is use half of the bag, so half an ounce. That would leave you another half of your bag to do other things with it. Or if you wanted to use them all, you would just double your recipe. You would use the whole ounce and then double your vodka and double your glycerin. But right now I think you could just eye it out and do about half and half if you don't have a kitchen scale, and get your half ounce for it. And then 6 ounces of vodka. You can also use rubbing alcohol. I just prefer vodka because even if I'm not going to drink it, if I'm going to put something on my skin or spray it on a surface that I'm going to touch, if it's food grade, I feel like that's best. If you can ever choose a food grade over a non-food grade, I always try to pick food grade. And then 2 ounces of vegetable glycerin. And we carry glycerin for sale by the ounce at the shop, but I know that other places like Walgreens and your common drugstore has glycerin as well. If it's something that you don't have on hand, it's not as hard to find as you would think. So what you would do is fill a clean, dry jar, and clear is okay while you're making it. So in the in-between stage, before it's done, it's a menstruum, it's in a holding stage. And with your rose petals, vodka, and glycerin, you're just going to add them all in there. I always put my petals in first because it's just easier to pour your liquids on top of it instead of your liquids and then your petals. They kind of want to spill over and not sink in as well. So I would put my half ounce of dried rose petals into my clean, dry jar. Remember, bone dry, because 1 drop of water can contaminate your whole batch. Your 6 ounces of vodka or rubbing alcohol, whatever pure grain alcohol it is you've decided, and your 2 ounces of glycerin. And you put it all in a jar with a nice, clean, dry lid and give it a good turn and shake. And then you do that daily for 3 days in a row. Now this can stay out on your countertop or in a sunny windowsill because for 3 days it's good to go, and the sun is our friend. So our friend soon becomes our enemy, but for the 3 days while we're making the rose water, we can embrace the sun and use it. And then after that's done, you need to strain your petals out. And this is really important because if you don't strain your botanicals out, they'll start to get kind of funky and decompose and make your rose water cloudy. You'll also lose your pretty pink hue that you're going to get. It's going to be a really nice like pastel pink. And then it oftentimes will clog up your bottles too when you transfer it into like a toner bottle or something that squeezes out. You don't want those botanicals to clog it up and just make it funky. And to strain it out, you can use your muslin bag, right? You could pour it into a funnel and then pour your solution right through into the jar or bottle you're going to store it in, and your muslin bag would capture all those botanicals. You could also use a coffee filter, cheesecloth, or even a thin paper towel spread out and just do a little bit at a time. But straining the botanicals out for extended shelf life and nice color is super important. Then, after that's been done, you've used the sun for 3 days and you've strained your petals out. Now you want to protect it from the sun and not keep it in the light any longer, and store it in a dark glass bottle. So even just like an amber glass bottle or a cobalt. And if you just don't have one, all you have are nice clear mason jars, it's okay. Just keep it in a cool dark spot, like back in your linen closet or a pantry that you know is dark and doesn't get a lot of light. And then you're able to use it freely, which means you would use it daily as like a facial toner, little sore spots, just as you would use any sort of facial toner or rose water. You can also put it in a spray bottle and use it as a space clearing spray like we talked about. You can fill little crystal bowls with it and soak your stones and crystals in it to charge it and cleanse them. So depending on your affinity to rose water, probably any interest or belief system could find a way to incorporate it into their daily routine. Now another thing, and this is a little uncommon for a lot of folks when I've done it at classes and stuff, people always kind of look, but these rose petals make one of the best, most delicious teas in my life. I mean, they are so good. And if you want to make a big pot or a pitcher of it, you can certainly use your muslin bag as a tea bag. But I don't mind putting just like a pinch, I don't really even measure, just in a little like pretty fancy teacup, a pinch of roses in the bottom, and then I pour my boiling water right on top, and they kind of float to the top for a second as they steep, and then they'll sink to the bottom. And when they sink to the bottom, for me, that's how I feel like it's telling me my tea is ready to drink and it's steeped long enough. So then you can just drink it without a tea bag or anything, and it leaves just a little bit of rose petals at the bottom of your cup. And many moons ago, that's how you would get a fortune told, right? By a fortune teller or a gypsy in the tea leaves. We're still waiting to read the tea leaves. So you would look at your bottom of your rose petals and swish it around and see if you saw something that led you to the answer of the question that you were there asking that day. It's easy, it's delicious, and its folk is that it heals a broken heart. So if you have somebody who has a sore, sad heart or a broken heart or a love lost, rose petal tea is an ancient cure-all for that. And this is a caffeine-free, really mild, easy to ingest and take in tea, so you can drink it daily. It doesn't have to be consumed with caution. Another way to use your rose petals is a rose petal vinegar. And I like to use just a white kitchen vinegar, just like what we did with the lavender. And then use the rose petals. I use about a tablespoon of botanical. And that's not much because these are dry and fluffy. So 1 tablespoon to about, of roses. Doesn't take much at all. To about 8 ounces of vinegar. It could even be 12. And the minute you put your rose petals into your jar and add your white vinegar, within less than 5 minutes, it turns a beautiful pastel pink. I mean, stunningly so. And then you need to do the same trick to hold your pink. And this, you don't wait 3 days. You do this within the time frame of about 20 to 30 minutes. You need to strain your petals out again. If you leave your botanicals, your petals, in your solution, rather it be for your rose water or even your tea or your vinegar, they'll start to discolor and turn a weird, undesirable, like dark brown. So the minute you get that pink in the color you want, you need to kind of pluck it from your solution to preserve and save that hue. And then, oh, she's on wheels. And then with your rose petal vinegar, you can mix it with oil and make it like a really cool salad vinegar, and it looks beautiful. So like if you're just having a lot of greens and veggies, especially like all the collards and the kales that are coming out this time of year, and like our spring CSA boxes or our cold frame crops, the rose petal vinegar just brings it to a new level. Cora and I leave it out on our kitchen table. We eat a lot of greens and salad and just sprinkle it on next to a bottle of like an infused olive oil or something like that. And it tastes really good. It's got a mild rose flavor. You can pick up on it a little bit, but mainly the color just makes it attractive and lovely. And then you get all those vitamins and minerals and flavonoids from the petals as well. Rose petal infusions are really easy to do, especially with the ones in your kit, because they're bone dry. So if you become a rose harvester yourself from your own garden or land, anytime you do an infusion of any type, you always want to bone dry botanicals. So you wouldn't like pick fresh roses and then come in and make your rose water. You would need to dry them out, dehydrate them, and then make your recipe. So with the bone dry rose petal, the coconut oil is a really good way to use it in your kitchen. And you take like a jar, just a clean mason jar, and then you line your rose petals on the bottom. At least that's the way I do. I kind of just put a nice little layer. I don't measure out any quantity because it just depends on the size of my jar. And then that solid at room temperature coconut oil, not the fractionated, like what you would get at Kroger to bake or cook with. It's like that grainy white, solid at room temperature. You scoop that out and fill your jar with it and seal it up really tight. And then you can just let the roses line the bottom. You don't have to mix it or stir it in at all. And after 3 or 4 days, you'll see the rose petals infuse into that white coconut oil. It's little streams of the color. It starts to go upward into it, and it turns it a really light pale pink, and it imparts a really mild light floral flavor. So you can also do this with ghee. If anybody cooks or bakes with ghee, the clarified butter, you can infuse it for flavor and color for your kitchen with these bone dry food grade rose petals. So like as a toast spread, instead of an avocado toast, you could do the coconut oil instead of a butter, and it would be infused with your roses. Same with ghee. Even to stir fry or cook, you would just incorporate it in as you would use any cooking oil. It would just have that light infused flavor of the rose and that really pretty color. Then you can use it cosmetically too for external applications, and you can infuse your bone dry in oils like almond oil or the fractionated coconut oil that we talked about, and use it as a face, body tanning or hair oil. And it does impart a nice light fragrance, not like if you got the absolute, the essential oil, but definitely you can tell it has a really good like hint of rose. Now I just said when you do any solution at all with your rose water or your vinegars, you need to strain your petals out to hold the color. And that holds true with any liquid at room temperature. So like your vodka, your vinegar, your glycerins, things of that nature. However, it doesn't hold true with your oils. Your oils preserve and they're a fat, so they don't oxidize as fastly, and you don't lose your color, and your botanicals don't break down as quickly as they do in a more water-soluble base. So your rose petals oils can stay in the bottom of your coconut jar. They can stay in your bottle of almond oil that you make for your skin or your body oil. So if it's an oil, the botanicals can stay. If it's a fat, basically. And if it's a water base and a liquid at room temperature, then most likely not. You can also use these, since they are food grade, to roll or top candies, granola, cakes, and things of that nature. A lot of times you'll see like those herbal goo balls that you make like for healthy snacks, and you roll them up, or like the cookie dough that doesn't have egg in it that you can eat at room temperature. And you can roll them in the rose petals, and it looks really pretty, and it imparts a nice taste and a fragrance, and it's just a way to get some more botanicals into your recipe. I've had friends bring me candies back from India, and they're these little twisted kind of like hard candies, but they have little rose petals like rolled. They're like rolled in rose petals. You can tell when the candies were still not quite dry and a little sticky. They look like they got rolled through it, kind of how we would sprinkle like powdered sugar or roll something through powdered sugar. And you just eat the candy with the rose petals right on it. Granola, any granola or muesli recipe that you use and make on your own, you could easily add a teaspoon to a tablespoon of the rose petals into it just for color, texture, and flavor. And then cakes, it's really simple and very lovely and beautiful, just to make a very simple like angel food cake. Frost it with like whipped cream or Cool Whip, and then just top it with a sprinkle of your rose petals, and it imparts a little bit of flavor and color. It's different, but in a lovely way, and you can use it as a dessert, a culinary treat. A lot of European cooks and chefs and recipes that I read call for rose water as an ingredient in baking. So they'll use rose water to flavor frostings or icings and things of that nature. Also, if you're a bath bomb person, I know we've done that a lot. Those are always fun. after we make the bath bombs to roll them or sprinkle them in rose petals. Now we wouldn't eat them this way, but we would bathe in them. It's another way to top them and finish them off. So this is the very important thing, and I saved the best for last, and I can't stress it enough. Especially with the flower of rose, more so than any other. Because it is so highly cultivated, it's so much in the commerce market, it's so marketed, it's generally highly sprayed, treated, or genetically modified. So you've got to be 110% that any rose you bring into your apothecary kitchen to ingest or eat or make a tea out of or drink, and for that matter put on your skin externally as an oil or a toner, is a food grade. It's like really, really, really important, specifically with roses, because they are a heavily commerced and heavily sprayed crop. So like a rose bundle that you might get, or a bag of rose petals you might get at like a craft shop or something, not that they wouldn't be lovely for your craft or your potpourri mix, but that would not be a food grade rose. And ours are even certified organic. That's how important it is to me with roses. I just need to be 110% that not one little thing of anything's been sprayed or dripped on there. The petals too are very absorbent when they're fresh, and they can absorb chemicals and pesticides way more so than other botanicals that have different less porous surfaces. So even if a rose looks okay or hasn't been sprayed for months and months, it's likely that it still contains a trace of those undesirable pesticides or fungicides. So you just have to be sure that anytime you use a rose, it's food grade. Now, the wild roses that grow in our woods around here, like the bramble roses is what we call them, those are food grade, and we know they don't have a lot of petals because they don't have the tight buds like we're accustomed to with a knockout or a cultivated rose. But you can collect them, they're food grade, and dry them. And then their hips in the fall, the rose hips, is where the wild roses in our part of the area really come in for medicine making. The rose hips are really high in vitamin C and nutrient dense. So you can also order from your catalog, your company, or wherever, your greenhouse, the species of, well, it's on the other side, of the apothecary species of rose if you want to plant them and cultivate them in your own yard. Just be sure you wouldn't buy like a knockout or a hybridized. You would buy the apothecary species, and they are readily available. So in conclusion, I wanted to touch on, Sheila asked me when I came in and I was scurrying in, the school that I go to get my training, besides being from 7th Street Gifts, a family owned and operated brick and mortar apothecary shop since 1999, is the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine. So I'm in that enrolled in the Herbal Immersion program right now. And then we are from 7th Street Gifts, and we are 7thstreetgifts.com in Newport, Kentucky. We got cool new business cards. We're still not open to walk-in yet, but we're happy to fill online orders, and we do delivery and ramp pickup. And we have all the food grade roses you could ever want. And in conclusion, for the month of March, we're talking about the red rose petals, and going to give you ideas for rose water, rose petal tea, rose petal vinegar, rose petal oil infusions, and rose petal toppings and candies, and way to incorporate it into your kitchen. And again, I'm Carissa from 7th Street Gifts in Newport, and thanks so much for watching, and thanks so much to Lawrenceburg Library.